Thank you guys for coming. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to have found this support group to be able to talk to this evening. I hope you enjoy and learn something. So the objectives that I'm going to go over today are just understanding the importance of great nutrition during cancer treatment, to learn the nutrition recommendations to optimize survivorship, and understand fact versus fiction and related to a lot of the specific health claims that you hear in the media and through Dr. Oz and all these other ways that you can research through the World Wide Web and things like that. So the benefits of great nutrition, especially in relation to cancer, it might seem pretty obvious, but you can have improved tolerance during your treatment. So when you're feeding your body well, you're fighting those things that shouldn't be there well, which includes both treatment and the cancer itself. You have a decreased occurrence of complications during your treatment. So when you can have a stable weight, when you don't have decreased immune system, which happens with good nutrition, you'll have decreased complications, and then you can have as smooth sailing as possible through treatment and through recovery and survivorship. Boost recovery after treatment, so have less time to feel like yourself again. If you eat well, you can hopefully feel like yourself much sooner and be able to go about your life. And better prevention of reoccurrence. So once you have already battled the treatment, once you have completed the treatment, then you're right back to where anybody else is. You're trying to prevent cancer, essentially, which is what we're all doing, trying to prevent diseases and prevent illness. So I understand that, cancer can be an all-consuming thing, and nutrition might not be something on your mind because there's a lot of things you have to worry about, whether it be medications, treatment, even after, wherever you are in your journey with cancer. Nutrition might not be at the forefront, but it really can be something that can boost your quality of life if you make it somewhat of a priority. We'll talk about all of the buzzword nutrition things eventually, but I want to take you back to how I think of nutrition, or how a dietitian thinks of nutrition. So the complete nutrition basics about what is food and how I think of food when I look at it. This is very basic information, but bear with me. All of your food is some sort of macronutrient. So what is a macronutrient? It's a carbohydrate, a protein, or a fat. So all of your foods are one of those three things or a combination of the three, or it can be two different things. So for example, fruits are completely a carbohydrate. Chicken is pretty much mostly a protein with a little bit of fat in there, depending on the type of cut that you get. And fat would be like oils and things like that. So all of those macronutrients, they have a certain role in the body, and you need all of those in combination to get optimal nutrition. So carbohydrates, their job is to break down into sugar. So all of our carbohydrates eventually break down into sugar. And the purpose of that is to provide us with energy. Protein is not typically supposed to be used for energy. So when it's broken down, it's absorbed, and we're supposed to use it to repair skin, repair muscles. Our DNA is made up of protein. So protein's more of a muscle building and immune system, and it's not supposed to be used for energy the way sugar is. Fat is really important for making cholesterol. You actually need some cholesterol in your body. Doctors always are yelling about cholesterol, but you do need some. Your body makes it on its own, and you need some dietary fat to help with that. And it makes hormones, which we of course need, and your body does need a thin layer of protective fat around it, whether it's around your organs or just around your muscles. So all of your food is made up of these macronutrients, and they all provide calories, which is pretty much a synonym for energy. So with that in mind, thinking about carbohydrates first. What types of carbohydrates should you eat? And so I talked about what they are on more of a science level, but what do they look like in your food? Starch is one of your major types of carbohydrates. So that'll be like your grains, your pasta, your rice, and then starchy vegetables. So like potatoes, corn, peas, beans, all of those foods. If you happen to have a history of diabetes, you probably are familiar with carbohydrates. They get talked about ad nauseum. These are the foods that I listed here are your carbohydrates to include in your diet. So you should not be afraid of these. These have vitamins and minerals that we need. They have whole grains that we need. These are the types of starch, carbohydrates that we need. Dairy is also a source of carbohydrates. Dairy is one of those combination foods, so it actually has some protein in there, some natural sugar, and some fat. So the sugar will be your carbohydrate. You know, milk, yogurt, and ice cream has most of your carbohydrates in it. Cheese does not. Check your labels on your dairy, because I'll talk about this later, but one of the ways that nutrition has changed throughout the years is that we used to try to make everything low fat. And so there's a lot of low fat options for particularly dairy, and low fat milk and things like that are okay, but low fat yogurt and low fat ice cream, a lot of times it's replacing the fat with sugar with low fat dairy. So it's kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul, essentially. So fat's supposed to be in there because it's naturally occurring in the dairy, so it's okay for it to be there. If you're just gonna replace it with sugar, which will kind of give you the same effect at the end of the day. Our fruits and vegetables. So never think that you shouldn't eat these. These are never gonna go out of style. They have vitamins and minerals that just can't be replaced. And they're a natural source of sugar and carbohydrates, which we need for energy. Going on to protein. So like I said, protein is used to help build our muscle. So our muscles are made of protein, so are animal muscle. So that's what you're eating when you're eating chicken, fish, turkey, beef. So choosing the leaner cuts are a little bit better for you. There's some research about eating excess red meats can cause or can have an increased risk of cancer, diabetes, and heart disease. So that is something that has been proven to be relatively true through research. So when you can, choose more like poultry, fish, turkey, your white cuts of meat, and your fish. Why does beef tend to cause more diseases like cardiovascular disease and cancer and things like that? It is the saturated fat is like one of the main contributors. So I'll talk about fat a little bit. But an excess of that has a rise in cholesterol, the bad cholesterol in your body, and a rise in inflammation, which is a big cause of many, many diseases. So chicken and fish and turkey just tends to be a lot lower in total fat and saturated fat. So the one thing that I wanted to touch on about protein and about fat and cholesterol and things like that is that eggs is a good source of animal protein as well, and this used to be one of the things that we shied away from, the yolk particularly, because of the cholesterol in it. So there's a difference between dietary cholesterol and fat. So red meat all of our animal foods have cholesterol. All of our animal foods also have some saturated fat. The excess saturated fat can be harmful. However, cholesterol is something that we also make in our body, and the more research that they've done, they've found that your body is going to compensate based on how much cholesterol you eat. So if you eat less, your body will make more. If you eat more, your body will make less. That's why eggs have kind of they're not anymore a food that you should limit so much because they're not high in fat, they just happen to be high in dietary cholesterol. So I will say that as far as added hormones and cancer, whether it's breast or prostate, are usually the two that are highlighted a lot, the research is just very inconclusive. And in general, I would recommend to limit your intake of highly processed foods that have a lot of hormones in them. So that would be like poorly made processed meats or soybean oil, which is very refined and very processed. But otherwise, the research with that is very inconclusive. Okay, so plant proteins is the one last thing I didn't touch on. So some of our plants also do have some protein, which is helpful. They also have some really healthy fats that I'll talk about. And beans, nuts, and seeds are a really good way to get in calories, especially if you're trying to gain some weight back that you may have lost during treatment. So finally, fats. There's two different big categories of fats. So you have your saturated fats, which is what I kind of touched on in like red meats and things like that. So all saturated fats are solid at room temperature. So that's the white marbling that's in your steak and red meat. That's butter, lard, and like Crisco and things like that. So they're all solid at room temperature. Unsaturated fats like olive oil, canola oil, avocado oil, they're all liquid at room temperature. By and large, if you can, try to more stick with the unsaturated fats. Those are the fats that are liquid at room temperature. So it's more complicated than this, but it's an easy way to remember. If you can think of, you want your blood to be flowing. You want your blood to be moving along easily. So you don't want the saturated fat that has the tendency to solidify and to slow you down and to cause inflammation to be so prevalent in your diet. Nuts and seeds, the oils that are in them, those are liquid at room temperature. So by and large, nuts and seeds are your unsaturated fats, your good fats. Based on all that I just said, you need a combination of your whole foods to create a healthy diet. So, including whole grains, including fruits and vegetables, including protein and healthy fats. This might sound like things that you've learned before, but it helps to put it all together and to understand that a combination and not avoiding any certain foods is really key, because there are some diets that you'll read about or you'll find in cancer. I've had patients that are on like a paleo diet, which eliminates legumes, which is like beans and things like that. And you don't need to eliminate those, because every food has its role. So healthy eating can be challenging. I know that firsthand. I talk to people about it every day. A recurring theme with nutrition is that we know what to do. It's just taking the leap to do it. I'm not saying anything crazy when I'm telling somebody to try to include more greens in their diet. They know that, but it can be challenging. It is true that you really do need to plan ahead and to think about it and to make it an effort or a conscious effort. It really helps if you have your family and friends do this with you. So, if you're lucky enough to have a lot of support, especially during a time when you're going through treatment or recovering, back into survivorship mode, make it a new goal or a new effort to try to plan out your meals ahead, because, usually we make our bad choices with nutrition when we didn't think about it ahead of time, and then all of a sudden it's, 7 o'clock at night and you haven't eaten and you don't know what to do, and then something that is not the healthiest choice is usually the option that seems to be the quickest. Just my tips for planning ahead. And keeping things that are easy, so don't overcomplicate things, and having your environment have healthy foods that are easy to grab. So there's a lot of research about just your food environment. There's research for people that are trying to lose weight, but you can flip it on the upside to try and just make it healthy. So having things on your counter, having fruits on your counter, you're more likely to grab it if it's in plain sight. Same with having leftovers not stored under tin foil, because you tend to forget about it, or because you can't see it. It's not right in your face. So keeping your fruits and vegetables on the first row of your fridge instead of in the crisper, because they're less likely to go bad. So just little things you can do that will make your choices more in your face and easier to make. So the question was, what do I consider a good intake of carbohydrates or sodium? So with carbohydrates, so like I talked about, they're in a lot of different foods. So a lot of times when people say I'm on a low carb diet, they really mean I'm on like a low grain diet or a low grain diet, because fruits and vegetables have carbs in them too. So I think that one of the easiest things to do is try to mimic the plate method. If you have seen My Plate, it's the newer My Pyramid essentially. So it has about a quarter your plate as your starch option. So that's like your grains, your potatoes, all those things that I talked about that are starch. And then half your plate will be fruits and vegetables. So just doing that, and you don't have to measure anything, just kind of eyeballing it is an easy thing to do. As far as sodium, it depends on your heart history, especially, and your hypertensive history. So anywhere from 1,500 to 3,000 milligrams will be a range for someone. How to balance carbohydrate intake with exercise, and needing carbs with exercise, and also lowering your carbohydrates tends to be a weight loss regimen. So that's a challenging question. It's a very challenging question. I will tell you that a typical person, if they're not dieting, will have about 50% of their calories from carbohydrates. If somebody is more dieting or low carb, it drops down to about 40. So it's not a huge change. So there's small things that you could do that you might not even notice to the naked eye, just changing portions ever so slightly to lower carbohydrates, but still provide yourself with enough energy. The national recommendation, which is very, very new for sugar, added sugar for women, you should keep it to 6 teaspoons or less, and added sugar for men is about 9 teaspoons or less per day. So that doesn't mean, I'm sorry?
That's my cup of coffee.
Right, so it can be. So yeah, like 6 teaspoons or 9 teaspoons is very easy to get to. It's not natural sugar, so it's not something you have to worry about when you're like drinking milk. There's natural sugar in there. When you're eating an apple, there's natural sugar in there. But it's more things like coffee creamer or like a dessert or stuff or when sugar's hidden in things like marinades and ketchup and things like that. So it can add up. And eventually,
what soda blows that away?
Oh, every. I think there might be 10 teaspoons in a can.
Yes.
I think. Yeah, about 10 teaspoons in a can of soda. So fruit juice and cranberry juice, it's usually mostly naturally occurring, but it's definitely important to look at the label because you could have all natural orange juice, which is it will be 100% natural, or cranberry cocktail will have added sugar in it. So, and it can take a little investigating to find added sugars sometimes, but you really have to read the ingredients particularly. So not just the nutrition facts, but the ingredients portion of the label. And anything that says fructose or sucrose, so those are the food science words for sugar. So a lot of things ending in OSE will be, or like high fructose corn syrup, so that's one of the added sugars that we all love to hate. LDL, so I know LDL. LDL is really the one that you want to be cognizant of when you're talking about risk for heart disease and risk for cancer and things like that, and inflammation. So under 100 is completely optimal. Under 120 is relatively optimal. Triglycerides under 150. Triglycerides are a big one that I'm more interested in than sometimes I feel like than it's talked about in other disciplines. But triglycerides tend to raise significantly when you have a lot of refined sugars in your diet, so a lot of refined carbohydrates in your diet, and a lot of alcohol as well. But the refined carbohydrates is the one that interests me. So yeah, good question. So is canola oil, or which one is better for an unsaturated fat for cooking? So olive oil has a lower smoke point than canola oil. So just for practicality reasons, canola oil is a little easier to cook with because your kitchen won't smoke up. What are my thoughts of 1 or 2 diet sodas a week? I think that's okay. So a lot of the research, I didn't talk about artificial sweeteners specifically, but that research can also be pretty inconclusive, and a lot of the research about that is given to like test animals, and it's given in a huge amount for it to be shown to be harmful. I use artificial sweeteners. I don't think there's something that you should use as a freebie that you should just pile into your life and into your diet for without a care in the world, but to use as a sweetener substitute for once in a while, I don't think it's a huge deal. So where were we? So we were just talking about being optimal with your nutrition. Now I know that doesn't always happen because a lot of issues can come up with cancer and with your journey through treatment and through recovery. Wherever you are in your journey with cancer, these issues might have been behind you, or they might still be something that you're dealing with. But a lot of our treatments can cause us to have absolutely zero interest in food, absolutely zero interest in the quality of food or anything related to it, which can be problematic. So these are just some of the issues that unfortunately come with treatment related to cancer and the cancer itself. Some tips and tricks for dealing with some of the major symptoms. So poor appetite, that can be happening, whether you're in recovery or still going through treatment. One of the biggest things that I always recommend is to stop thinking about your meals as the classic American, breakfast, lunch, dinner. Just try to, every couple of hours, 2 to 3 hours, eat something that's beneficial, that's putting calories in your body. And when you have a poor appetite and when you start to have weight loss, your main goal is calories and energy and protein. So it's always ideal to include your fruits and vegetables, your whole grains, your lean protein, but sometimes, a chicken salad with red peppers and carrots does not sound like an appetizing thing to eat. If it's been a couple hours and all you can eat is ice cream, then eat ice cream because it's better than nothing. The main thing that you want is you want your weight to stay as stable as possible because that will help you with treatment. You know, a lot of your treatments are being dosed based on your weight at the current time. When that changes, it can complicate things and make it, you know, that much worse for you. Nutrition shakes, whether it be like the commercially available nutrition shakes like Ensure or Boost or things like that, or making a smoothie yourself with protein powder and fruits and vegetables. And yeah, you're exactly right. That's a good way to sneak in those foods that you might not be eating in the form of a salad, but you can sneak it in and it will help you. And sipping your calories takes a lot less energy than it does to chew it, which can be helpful when you're having, you know, complications like this. Making your mealtime part of your daily routine. If you haven't been eating well, but you always watch a show at a certain time of day, or you always go to the post office on Tuesdays or whatever, try to make some sort of food activity related to your routine, so it just becomes another thing that you're doing without thinking. And of course, creating a pleasant environment. So whenever we're in a, you know, we eat when we're celebrating, we eat when we're with family, when we're with friends. It's a lot harder to make yourself have an enjoyable meal when you're sitting by yourself. So as much as you can, surround yourself with people, and they'll most likely feed you, because that's what happens, because we're eating now. So the question was, what is an ideal breakfast? Is, you know, cereal the most terrible thing in the world to eat for breakfast? Should we do it? Is it bad to skip breakfast for weight loss? So breakfast is very, very important. I would argue that, yeah, it might be the most important meal of the day, because if you are, you know, eating regularly throughout the day prior, then breakfast will be that first meal after the longest time you have gone in the last 24 hours without eating. So when you're awake, I would typically recommend not going more than 6 hours without eating. But most of us sleep, you know, 6 hours at least, or 6 to 8, or hopefully something along those lines. So it is very important, because you're, you know, the word breakfast, you're truly breaking the fast. And I do personally always try to find a higher protein breakfast, mostly because it keeps you full longer too, because I feel like when I eat cereal, I am starving an hour later. So, and carbohydrates are meant to do that. They're meant to be an easily digestible, easily energy usable source of food. But if it's something that, you know, you're going to be, if that's your day starter, yeah, I agree that I would more recommend, not that you can't have cereal per se, but just always try to find a way to add protein to your breakfast. Question was, is a sprouted grain, is it better than your classic like breakfast cereals? I do try to find the least processed food in general. So whether it's a grain, whether it's a meat, you know, the closer you can get back to the whole food itself, so to the wheat that it was, the way it was grown, the better. So, you know, I don't have a problem with that, or I do support that, but I'm not somebody that likes to villainize any foods. So I, you know, play by the 80-20 rule as best you can. Should you never eat cereal? No, you can have cereal, but, you know, by and large, it is really helpful if you do find protein in your breakfast. So if you do get Greek yogurt or eggs or peanut butter, something that has some protein that'll stick with you and that will give you some restorative energy to start your day with. Absolutely, yeah. Yogurt or cottage cheese, Greek yogurt, yep, they're all good combination foods. So they all have some protein, some fat, some carbohydrates. Anytime you have foods that are complicated food or have, you know, a lot of different components to it, it'll keep you fuller longer. It's more for your body to work with and digest. The difference between Greek yogurt and regular yogurt is just that it is strained more so than your regular yogurt, so the protein is a little bit more concentrated per volume. So it has a little bit more protein in there, which is helpful. And a lot of people like it because it's thicker. A lot of people don't like it because it's thicker. Your regular yogurt has protein in it too, but the Greek yogurt just has a little bit more. Taste changes is also something that can happen with cancer treatment. So this is a perfect example of when I would be, you know, okay with adding some sugar or some different sweeteners to your food to kind of tweak the way you taste it. So a lot of times after treatment or during treatment or in recovery, things just don't taste the way you remember or taste the way like you feel like they're supposed to or the way they used to. So tweaking it, whether it be with spices or with sugar or artificial sweeteners, can like enhance the flavor or just kind of trick your taste buds or trick your memory to what you think something should taste like, which can help with eating a little bit more than you might. I've asked a lot of people to explain what the taste change feels like, and I get cardboard a lot. You know, so if you're having a bitter taste, go to sour. If you're having a sour taste, go to sweet. So kind of try to do the opposite of what you're feeling without tweaking anything. This can also be an opportunity to like try new foods. So there's a lot of nostalgia and there's a lot of memory that goes along with food. You know, if you try to eat your favorite lasagna that your wife has been making you for 35 years and all of a sudden it doesn't taste the right way, then, you know, that can be discouraging. But, you know, it can be a good opportunity to try a new food because you might not have any memory associated with what that food is supposed to taste like. So you can, you know, use that opportunity to just accept the way it tastes the first time. You know, so if you've never had Thai food, if you've never been a fan of Mexican, you can, you know, it can be an opportunity to try something different just because there's a lack of memory associated with it. So this is similar to the poor appetite, but weight loss, like we were talking about, shakes. So, you know, you can get really creative with your protein powders, and even using powdered milk is like a cheap protein powder I recommend a lot. If you don't want to buy that big, you know, bulk thing that you see in GNC or Walmart or something, adding those to fruits, vegetables, ice cream. Using whole fat dairy is a really good way to add calories. All of your fat is going to have more calories per volume than carbohydrates and protein. That's the way fat is. So you get more bang for your buck with adding fat if you happen to be trying to regain some lost weight. So your high-fat foods will be, you know, using oil in cooking or salad dressings, or nuts and seeds like nut butter or peanut butter. I tell people to add peanut butter to everything. I've added peanut butter myself to oatmeal. I think it tastes good. Just some ways to increase calories without having to increase the sheer volume of your diet. Moving on to nutrition and survivorship. So now you're, like I said, you're basically back in the same mode as I am. I'm trying to eat to prevent disease. I'm trying to eat to be the healthiest me I can be. You know, so including all those foods I talked about, including your whole foods. So every time I eat something, or not every time, but, you know, 80-20 rule, let's say, the best thing you can do is just try to backtrack that food and figure out where it came from. You know, so this sandwich I'm eating, where did it come from? Are there whole fruits and vegetables? Are there whole vegetables on it? Is the protein good quality? Is the bread good quality? You know, if you can backtrack and it doesn't get you lost when you're thinking about backtracking your food, then it's probably an indication that it's close to a whole food, or it's a natural food, or healthy, or has a lot of vitamins and minerals. Limiting processed foods and added sugar and sodium, of course. So avoiding a lot of intake of red meats, which we talked about a little bit. Processed meats are another big thing. So breakfast sausage and bacon and things like that. So they just tend to be loaded with sodium, unfortunately, which is not really good for anybody regardless of health history. And they tend to increase inflammation and do kind of the same thing that red meats do for a little bit of the same reasons. They're higher in saturated fat, so an excess of them can cause some increased risk for chronic disease. So my favorite part, the buzzword, the nutrition claims that are out in the media or out on the internet. So one of the bigger ones is, I think, omega-3s. So omega-3s are a type of unsaturated fatty acid that are, so unsaturated are the fats that are liquid at room temperature. They're the good ones, the ones that we want to include in our diet. They are mostly found in fatty fish, so like tuna and salmon, and also some nuts, like walnuts and flax seeds as well. They tend to be really promoted as far as cancer prevention, cancer treatment, things of that nature. There's a study called the SELECT study, which had talked about selenium and vitamin E, particularly in the study as it happened, and how that helped with patients with prostate cancer. So selenium is an antioxidant, as well as vitamin E is also an antioxidant. Unfortunately, there was no benefit from selenium supplementation, and there was actually an increased risk of prostate cancer with vitamin E. Then they checked retroactively everybody that was participating in this study, their levels of omega-3 fatty acids in their body, and those that had blood levels were highest had an increased risk. So why am I telling you this? Because this is all terrible. So I think it speaks to the idea that, so this study, everybody was being supplemented with things. So they weren't eating foods that were high in these nutrients. they were taking pills or they were taking vitamins in the form of a pill or in the form of a supplement. So I think it just adds to the idea to not try to supplement your diet or not try to take 100 pills to help the health of your diet, but to try and eat the foods that are highest in these nutrients, because the American Cancer Society encourages intake of these whole foods, encourages intake of fatty fish, and encourages intake of foods that have naturally occurring selenium and vitamin E, because it's completely different, just the chemistry of when you eat a whole food versus the chemistry when you're taking a supplement that is that nutrient isolated. And I don't even know the intricacies of how different that is to somebody's body. But, I think that's kind of the take-home message of this study, that eating the whole food, over a long period of time will help you better than trying to supplement your diet. The question was, is a problem with supplements, there's no regulation. So that is true that a lot of our supplements that are found in GNC, so vitamins, protein, things like that, they fall into this subcategory where they're not a food and they're not a drug. So they're not regulated by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, just because they're in this subcategory. So there is pretty limited regulation. You kind of have to prove that what you're saying is on it. There's some manufacturing quality regulations, but as far as somebody actually, approving or disproving the nutrient itself, it's kind of free for the companies to do a lot that doesn't need to be regulated the way food does. Yeah, so the question was about Garcinia cambogia. It's a fatty, fad supplement. It was promoted by Dr. Oz, I think. I think it's, honestly, I don't even know. I think it's a fruit extract of some sort. There's really no proven benefit to taking that.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know about any adverse effects, but I do know that I don't, it claims to boost metabolism and all these wonderful things, but that is not exactly, doesn't really happen. So my last one, another favorite nutrition claim is, of course, sugar. Sugar is complicated. Sugar feeds when somebody says that sugar feeds cancer, that is true in a sense, but it's also kind of tweaking the truth to hone in on, what wants to be told. So sugar does feed cancer because sugar feeds all cells. All of our cells feed off sugar. That's how they get energy. So to say that cancer gets fed off sugar is true in a sense, but it's not. That's just how all of our cells stay alive. The problem with cancer is that there's also nothing that can kill it the way that it should be able to be killed. That's why we have to have all these, aggressive treatments. All cells, including cancer, use glucose as energy. In the absence of sugar, so if we are eating a low-carb diet, to a certain extent, our body will kind of transform protein that we eat and fat that we eat into sugar, because your body needs a certain level of glucose in the blood. When you take your blood and somebody goes hypoglycemic, that's not good for anybody, regardless of of diabetic history, of cancer history. So to a certain extent, your body will always be making glucose regardless of intake. There is some research with excessive intake of your added sugars, of your refined carbohydrates, having increased risk for chronic disease over a long period of time. So a long period of time of increased refined carbohydrate intake, continually having slightly raised levels of glucose in your blood will continue to have slightly raised levels of insulin in your blood. Insulin is needed when there's high levels of glucose in your blood, but insulin is also a pro-inflammatory hormone. So it creates, and insulin gets released in your blood when you are in a I just ate phase of cycling through your day. So when it's consistently raised, your body consistently thinks I just ate, and it's consistently working under that assumption. So that's kind of the problem with excess sugar intake. I don't think that you need to eliminate and have a no sugar diet and have a super strict paleo situation, but the monitoring added sugars as far as the 6 teaspoons and 9 teaspoons is something to think about when you're choosing your meals for the day. The question is it beneficial for a cancer patient to cut down on carbs? So if you're eating adequately, if say you were eating 2,000 calories before, now you're eating 2,000 calories, but your carbohydrates have shifted. You have lower carbohydrate intake now, but still 2,000 calories. So, hopefully your body will still, like I said, continue to have those consistent glucose levels in your blood, and it may be compensating a little bit different than it was before. The problem is when we eat in excess in general, so in excess carbohydrates in general. So let's say for your body to sustain its weight, you should eat, 200 grams of carbohydrates per day, which is a pretty average intake for an adult male. But if you consistently ate like 250 every day for the next 10 years, then that's when the problem would arise, I suppose. Because you'll have consistent increased insulin levels with the consistent increased carbohydrates. Yeah, so how to increase red blood cells and like iron in your diet or in your blood. So for it to take effect in your body, it does take a while for your dietary iron to have an effect. So this is one of the reasons to not eliminate red meat completely, so you can include it in moderation, between like 2 and 4 times a month or something to that effect. I probably wouldn't do more than like once a week, but red meat does have a lot of heme iron, which is the type that's really easily absorbed in our body. And spinach also, some of your leafy greens has some of our non-heme iron, which is a little bit less easily absorbed, but still helping. So, truly the easiest way to increase that is through when they give you IV iron, but of course that's not something that's totally feasible every day. But dietary iron is something that it does take a long time to replete. But your red meats are probably the best foods, and protein, animal protein in general. So chicken too, turkey will help as well. The question was, is the Mediterranean diet healthy eating or is it a fad? I think it's healthy eating. It's actually, so the American or the North American dietary guidelines, they revamp themselves every 5 years. The most recent one was in 2015, and they used a couple of what they consider the most healthy diets to use as their motivation or their muse, basically, and the Mediterranean diet was one of them. So I think I like that one a lot. It's moderate in fat, but it's all your unsaturated fats, a lot of olive oil, a lot of fatty fish, not eliminating any certain foods, but just eating everything in moderation, always including greens and vegetables and things like that. It's not anything that's super strict. It's not anything crazy. Are soft drinks linked to cancer? So that goes back to the sugar thing. Soft drinks are one of the things that I wouldn't say that something should be a never food, but there really is no benefit to just regular soda. Diet soda, that is okay in moderation, so that has those artificial sweeteners in them. So like I said, I don't think you should tell yourself I can never have this because it has an artificial sweetener in it, but there's a fine line. You also shouldn't be a free pass to just be able to have a 12-pack a day of diet soda.